For those of you who watched my previous video, you will remember John and Margaret and their first date. They met on an over-60s dating site, and that first date, over a coffee, went better than either of them had expected. But at the end of that meeting, they made no commitment to see each other again. When John got home that day, he sat down and thought about their meeting. In his opinion, it had gone well, and he had enjoyed her company. She had also said she enjoyed meeting him. But John couldn't help thinking, maybe she was just being polite. He thought Margaret was a very attractive woman, intelligent, well-spoken, and for her age, she looked wonderful. She was clearly someone who took care of herself, and that made John wonder, why would a woman like her be interested in a man like him? He thought of himself as an okay sort of man, but a bit rough around the edges, not nearly as polished as Margaret. So the question stayed in his mind, why him? But one thing he did know, he wanted to see her again. That evening, he sent her a message on the dating site. He gave her his Facebook details and asked if they could talk on Messenger instead. He also gave her his mobile number. Before he finished the message, he told her again that he had enjoyed their meeting. Then he asked if she was free that weekend, because if she was, he would like to take her out to dinner. Once the message was sent, he left the laptop on, hoping that he would get a fast response. Sitting in front of the television, whatever was on was not really registering with him. Every 10 or 15 minutes, he was back at the laptop checking if Margaret had answered his message, but no. He continued like that until just after 10 p.m. Still no answer, and he was feeling down. If she had been interested, she would have replied earlier. Climbing into bed, he decided he had to stop thinking about it. Pity, he thought. She would be nice to have close, even as just a friend. He was just about asleep when the message tone went off on his mobile phone. It sprang him wide awake. It had to be her. He knew it would be her, but is this going to be a rebuff? Worriedly, he picked up and opened the phone. There was the message. Thank you for your message. Yes, please. Dinner on Saturday would be very acceptable. Speak tomorrow. The next morning, John was up early. He quickly made a pot of coffee because he wanted to reply to Margaret's message. He wrote, "I'm very happy, and I'm really looking forward to Saturday. If you like, I could pick you up from your place. I was thinking we could try that new Indian restaurant in town. I've heard it has some very good reviews. I'll book a table for 7:30. I hope that's okay." He poured himself a coffee and sat down to wait for her reply. Suddenly, life felt good again. Just 10 minutes later, a message came through. Margaret wrote, "I've seen that restaurant. That would be interesting, as I've never tried Indian food before. No need to pick me up. I'll get a taxi. See you then." John wasn't quite sure how to feel, a little disappointed because she didn't want him to pick her up, but also happy because maybe it was just too soon for her to give him her address. But then he looked again at the message. She had put 2 kisses at the end, and that really lifted his spirits. When Saturday finally arrived, John found himself getting quite excited about seeing Margaret again. He stood looking at his wardrobe, wondering what to wear. He even thought about buying her a small gift, but decided against it. Flowers last time? He thought. Tonight, I'll just pick up the bill. That's enough for now. He went to the hairdresser and had a haircut, then bought himself a new shirt, smart but casual. When he got home, he looked at his watch. 6 hours to go, and suddenly, his good mood dipped a little. It was going to be a long wait. John arrived at the restaurant 30 minutes early. He wanted time to look at the menu. and choose something before Margaret arrived. He asked for a table where he could see the entrance and ordered a soft drink. Although he had eaten Indian food before, he realized as he looked through the menu, he had no idea what to order. That worried him slightly. Then he had an idea. He would ask the waiter for recommendations when the time came. So instead, he started looking at the wine list. Margaret arrived 5 minutes early. The restaurant was quiet, so she spotted him immediately. John stood up as she approached the table and remained standing until she was seated. Old-fashioned manners. But Margaret noticed and gave him a warm, knowing smile. It was a good start to the evening. But as the night went on, the conversation would drift into areas that would leave both of them with small seeds of doubt. When it was time to order, Margaret admitted that she wasn't very fond of hot, spicy food. John felt an immediate sense of worry. The waiter reassured them that the chef could make the dishes milder and that it wouldn't be a problem. But John was already thinking, this was a mistake. I should have asked her first. For a few minutes after that, the conversation slowed, but Margaret saved the moment by talking about her visit to a garden center earlier that day and her love of plants and flowers. That lifted John's spirits because he loved his garden too. He told her about the vegetables he grew and his fruit trees, and for a while, the conversation flowed again. And then, the food arrived. John saw Margaret's face as the dishes were placed on the table. He could tell immediately this was going to be a problem. John enjoyed the food very much, but Margaret only tasted a little of each dish and ate mostly rice. After a while, John said gently, "I can see you're not too keen on the food." Margaret smiled politely and said she was sorry, but the spices were a bit strange for her, and she was struggling a little. And once again, the conversation slowed, and the evening became just a little bit awkward. It was Margaret who saved the conversation again. She asked John if he had any hobbies. He told her that, apart from watching some sport, football, ice hockey, and tennis, most of his time was spent in the garden or decorating and maintaining the house. He told her he had been divorced for several years, but he and his ex-wife were still on good terms. He had one daughter who was married with 2 children, and she visited him regularly, making sure he was keeping on top of things. Margaret asked him if he traveled much. John told her he had traveled quite a lot in the past and had always enjoyed it, but now he didn't really have the same interest. "It's not much fun traveling alone," he said. And then the conversation turned to Margaret. She told him that her husband had died 4 years earlier. He had suffered from cancer, and she had cared for him at home for nearly 3 years before he passed away. She had 2 sons. One was in the army, serving abroad, and the other had moved to Thailand, and she wasn't entirely sure what he was doing there. As she spoke about her family, John could hear a touch of sadness in her voice. Then she said something that made John think. She told him that every Sunday, she went to church, and she always prayed for her 2 sons. John wasn't a religious man, but he was curious. "You go every Sunday?" he asked. "Yes," she said, "and I help out at the church as well. It's an important part of my life." John thought about this for a moment and decided it was best to be honest. "I have to admit," he said, "I'm not a religious man." He looked at her as he said it, trying to judge her reaction, but Margaret simply nodded and said she understood. Still, John couldn't help feeling that this might be something important. The rest of the evening was polite conversation. They discovered they had similar taste in music, which helped a little. They talked about politics for a while, which is never the best subject on a date, especially when you don't quite agree. Food came up again, but this time, they talked about the kind of food they liked. John admitted he often had ready meals in the freezer, and Margaret said she used to enjoy cooking, but not so much now, just cooking for one. When they finished their wine, they had a coffee, and then John paid the bill. He asked if he should call her a taxi, or he would be happy to drive her home. At first, she said she didn't want to trouble him, and that she could get a taxi, but John quickly said it really was no trouble. She looked at him for a moment and said, "If you're sure, thank you. I'll come with you." And that made John very happy. By the time they reached the car, it had started to rain. For some reason, John felt that the rain somehow reflected the evening, not quite what he had hoped for. The drive to Margaret's house was quiet. Very little was said. Both of them were lost in their own thoughts, going over the evening and wondering what it might mean for the future. And when they arrived outside her house, John spoke first. "I must apologize for the restaurant," he said. "I enjoyed the food, but I could see it wasn't really for you. I'm sorry." Margaret smiled gently and replied, "I feel bad too. I didn't really think about it when you mentioned it. I know Indian food can be spicy, but I didn't quite connect that at the time." And then she added, "But I did enjoy your company and our conversation, and I hope we can do better next time." John noticed she didn't say much more than that, just a small nod of her head. By now, the rain was getting heavier. "Just wait here a moment," John said. He stepped out of the car, went to the back, and took an umbrella from the trunk. Then he walked around, opened her door, and said, "Let me walk you to your door." As Margaret stepped out of the car, she looked at him and said softly, "John, you really are a true gentleman." And they walked together to her front door, under the umbrella, the rain falling steadily around them. At the door, they paused. Margaret put her key in the lock, then turned back towards him, stepped a little closer, and gently kissed him on the cheek. "Thank you again," she said softly. "Good night and sweet dreams." Then she stepped inside and closed the door. So the story continues. I have one more update, the third date. This is the one that shows if or not there is a future to the relationship. Does religion split them up? Please subscribe, like, and ring the bell to follow us. Thank you for watching.